What's up, guys? Welcome back to Talkin Hawkins, our Stranger Things in review. My name is Kyle, your host, guys. Welcome to Project Potter. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 6, guys. We have just 2 episodes left after this in the season, and I've been pretty down on the season so far, guys, with the exception of a couple of standout episodes. This one kind of falls somewhere in the middle of that, so if you haven't seen the series before, guys, I go through my thoughts on the episode. My favorite character, which is the Hawkins hero. My least favorite character, which is the mouth breather, and a score out of 10, guys. So some things in this episode I did like. We spent obviously a lot of time with Steve and Dustin and Robin here. Dustin kind of leaves for a little bit there, or he's like, I'll remember you. And he goes down a grate. Steve and Robin get captured, and then they obviously are just interrogated, and Steve takes the majority of the torture. And they're like, who do you work for? Who do you work for? And he's like, Scoops Ahoy, dude. He's like, that's it. And he's like, I've told you everything I need to know. And they're like, we don't believe you, don't believe you. Eventually they tie Robin and Steve up, and they have like kind of a reminiscing moment about, oh, remember in high school we called like Miss Clickety Clack or whatever. I just didn't really feel the chemistry between them. I don't know what it was. It just didn't feel like they were like high school sweethearts or anything. Like Dustin is teasing Steve about, falling in love with Robin, but I just don't see it. Like I felt Steve and Nancy a lot more. This one, I'm just like, just seems like a girl you kind of work with, and Steve hasn't really shown any interest in her at all. So this feels a little forced to me. I do like that they give him like the truth serum at the end, and they're just like speaking. They're like, oh, Dustin's going to find you, and they're going to call Hopper, and you guys are going to be toast. That's a fun scene. And then obviously Dustin coming back at the end, where he just brings the spear into the guy and just electrocutes the guy. I was like, that was sick, dude. Like, I couldn't believe that. And they drop a whole bunch of that stuff like down layers and layers, so it like burns through. He spent time with Murray. Again, Hopper is like, you know what, man? He brings Alexi out because Alexi's like not telling them. There's a funny scene where he goes to get some a slushie. And he's like, here you go. And he's like, oh, and by the way, the Burger King and the 7-Eleven, not near each other at all. And Murray's like, I never said they were. Hopper gets a slushie, and he's like, oh, this is strawberry. And he's like, what's wrong? And Murray's like their translator. So there's like some comedic relief there. And he's like, you said this is strawberry and it's shitty. And he's like, it's all the same. It's sugar on ice. And he's like, nope, he wants the cherry. And he's like, no cherry, no deal. And he's like sitting back there. And Hopper's like, oh, yeah? And he's like, you know what, man? He takes him out. He throws him outside, throws him the handcuff keys, throws him the car keys, and then he shuts the door. And he's like, you know what? Alexi could have run before, because Joyce and Murray are like, dude, he's going to run away. And Hopper's like, listen, dude. He's like, Alexi stayed with us all day yesterday. He's like, you know why he didn't run away? Because he's scared. Because he's scared if he goes back without any injuries, that they're going to think he just spilled all the secrets. And so he can't go back there. So he's going to stay with us. And they're like, and while he's doing that, Alexi, it's like, cuts to him, and he's like, he can't believe it. He takes off the handcuffs, and he gets in the car, and he's like, got his hand back here. And he's like, oh, and he's like, just about to drive off. They're like, Hopper, he's starting the car. And they open it up. And then he's sitting there, and he's just sitting there, and Alexi realizes everything Hopper said was true. And so he sits there, and he's like, it's like a sad realization. And he gets out of the car and turns the car off and gives the keys to Hopper. And Hopper's like, I'm sorry, what did he say? And then Murray's like, hey, strawberry will do just fine, actually. And Hopper like throws his keys up. And that's a good scene. I really, really like that. The way that was shot and everything there. Once again, we tap into Elle's powers, and we're trying to find out where Billy is. And they're like, oh, he's just sitting on his bed, and like he wants us to come to him. And they're like, oh, it's a trap. But, if we go there, then we're going to be screwed. And they're like, no, because like it's not an ambush, because we're going to know whether they're coming. And it's like Elle is going to kick ass. And I was like, I want to go see if I can find Billy. Or she like goes over and touches them, and then he like pulls her in, and then she's trying to find out like what caused, like what happened, why is Billy so bad, because they didn't know. And so we get this really cool flashback where Elle goes back, and she goes all the way back, and we see Heather in the tub, and then we see Billy like crashing his car, getting dragged in the warehouse. We see Billy doing the sacrificing or whatever. But mostly, guys, Elle ends up on a beach, and Elle is kind of talking to them, and the kids are all sitting around. And Max is like, oh, if it's a beach, it's a memory. They're in California. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Elle is like going through, and it's really, really neat because she's going up. She's like, I think I see the root or the source. And it's like down on like the storm that looks down on the beach. And she's walking along the shore, and there's a beautiful woman, which I think is his mother at first. And she's like, oh, have fun, Billy. Watch out for the waves. And he's like, I will. And it's like happy times. And then the next thing is like his dad being a dick to him at like baseball. And he's like, oh, what did I raise? Like a pussy? And he's like, whoa. Billy runs and he's like, yeah, run like you always do. And then Elle's like running after Billy. And then she like gives his dad like a mean look, which is cute. But she keeps running. And we just see more and more scenes of Billy's dad being a jerk. And then like a scene of Billy's dad and his mom like fighting. And then Billy trying to protect his mom. And then the dad like throwing things. And you can just tell that like the dad is not a good person. And then eventually she sees the memory where Billy meets Maxine. And he's like, shake her hand, Billy. And it's just like, he doesn't respect his dad clearly. And we've seen bits and pieces of that. But this is where we really see like why Billy is like this and why Billy is a bully, because he was abused and, you know, he had an abusive father and his dad wasn't good to him and his dad never treated him right. And it's like, oh, he's not a bad guy just to be a bad guy. It's like, this is really like rooted hatred that he's got there. So Elle starts to really feel for him. And then she eventually gets to the car scene where he crashes and finds out like kind of what's going on. But yeah, I just think this is really, really well done. And I think it really brings the episode up and saves it, because other than that, I was finding myself once again a little bored, but there's enough there, I think, to make it certainly better than recent episodes. And that's pretty much it. Okay, guys, my Hawkins hero for this one, it's actually going to be Mike Wheeler. Mike, I have kind of picked on a little bit here for his lack of acting, and I've done that for a couple of the characters in this one, but I think he really shows his acting chops here. There's a big scene where he's like, guys, you're not treating Elle like a person, you're treating her like a machine. She's not a machine, she should know her limits. And he goes to talk to Nancy, and Nancy's like, Elle's her own person, she has her own free will, she should know her limits more. And then Mike is like, can everyone just please take a minute and appreciate that Elle's a person. She's trying to just save the day, but she might not know her limits. And then he's like, I just want to come up with a different plan because I don't want to lose Elle again, and I love her. And he like says it really quickly, and they're like, what? And everyone's like, oh shit. And then Elle comes out and she's like, what's going on? And they're like, we're not doing anything. Like, don't worry about it. But it's a really sweet moment. And Mike is the one who sticks up for Elle, and he's the one that's like, hey, I'm not just saying like they're relying so much on Elle, and Mike is like, hey, we need to also like fend for ourselves a little bit here. And it's like, again, she's not a machine, and it's like there are real feelings there. And I really, really like it. And I think it's a really nice kind of comeback for for Mike, who's kind of struggled a little bit, I think, this season. And last season, when Max joined, he was being kind of a wet blanket where he's like, yo, he missed Elle. And Mike has always had the feelings for Elle, but you know, now that they've actually like kissing and dating, even if it's just like a young dating, it's really nice to see that he sticks up and he's like, dude, I care about Elle, and like, I don't want anything to happen to her. And I just thought it was a nice moment for Mike. And I think he is my favorite character for this one. Okay, guys, my mouth breather for this one, it's going to be the Russian interrogators. I just thought they were like really cheesy, and like, there was no real threat. Like, even when they were like, oh, we're going to bring in the doctor or whatever, they're like laughing. They're not like quite elite level, like villain threats. They're just kind of like goofy, like, again, very like cardboard cutout, one-dimensional villains, where I was like, I never felt like Steve or Robin were in real danger. Like, I mean, they bring the big knife out at the end, and like, he's going to like cut off one of Steve's fingers or something. And I was like, okay, well, now we're getting there. But I thought they were way too like, I don't know, they were just way too like relaxed before. And Robin tells them like, look, two kids that scoop ice cream for a living figured out your code in like a day. So like, you think you're hiding your code and you're just broadcasting it everywhere. And they're like, dude, imagine if someone with like intelligence or resources try to like caught on to you. So that was fun, but I just thought they were just very, very like flat. And every time they were on screen, I was like, oh my God, we're interrogating them still. And it's just like, I don't know. You just knew nothing was really going to happen to them. And then like, it was nice to see Dustin come back with Erica, but the Russian interrogators, I think, were just the weakest part of this episode. Okay, guys, that brings us to the score. This is an 8-4 for me. The reason this is a little bit higher for me is mainly because of that whole sequence with Elle on the beach. I thought was beautifully done. I thought it was stunning. And I thought the emotional impact that it had was really, really powerful, where Elle was just going through and like, you see why Billy is the way he is, man. It's like, that's so important to understand the villain. Oh, also, guys, I didn't mention the disgusting, super well done, but disgusting feature of when Billy's like, first of all, Elle like takes the blindfold off, and she's like, once she takes the blindfold off, she's usually good. And she's like, oh my God. And she's like, Mike, and no one's around there. And then Billy comes out and he's like, you shouldn't have gone looking for me. He's like, now we can see you. He's like, we can all see you. And then all of the like flayed can like see where she is now. And he's like, we built this for you. And there's a great scene. I'm sorry I didn't mention this before, guys. Billy has a great scene, or the Mind Flayer has a great scene where he's like, you open the door and we get a flashback of Elle first touching the Demogorgon. And then like, that's what kind of opened the door. And then he's like, we've been building this for you. And I was like, oh, okay. So are they going to like work with Elle? But then he's like, but now we're going to kill you. And then once we kill you, we're going to kill your friends. And then we're going to take over everyone. And I was like, oh, so you're not building it for Elle, which is confusing, but that's a really awesome scene. And Elle's like really scared and she escapes, but she like basically like Inception, she was like a dream within a dream and she had to get back out. She comes out and she's scared and it's like people are all going there. They're all zombie walking over there. And I love how it's like parts of families, but not all of them, where they're like at the fair and they're like, Adam, where are you going? And then like one of the wives is like, Phil, like what's going on? What are you doing? And they all walk to the same place, and then they just like kind of like spaz out, and then they just like fall into goop, and it just like forms into the Mind Flayer, and the Mind Flayer is growing and growing. And I'm like, oh, dude, that's terrifying. It's super well done, but it's like very creepy and horrifying. And to see people's faces like bubbling and stuff, oh my God. Barry Bauman stuff I think was cool. And with Alexi and Hopper and Joyce, that's always fun. It was really the main thing with Elle. I just think we spent a lot of this season with the kids all standing around watching Elle like do her blindfold thing. And that was a really cool trick in the beginning, but they've overused it. And it's just like, I feel like the kids aren't doing much this season. Like we had the junkyard fight last season and all that, but it's been mostly just Elle. And I just feel like the season has been a huge miss so far. And even though there's some strong elements, I'm really, really disappointed at this season 3. And I thought it was going to be excellent, especially after the opening episode. But yeah, this is, I would say, a better one, but I still wasn't like totally invested throughout. So that's kind of where we're at. Okay, guys, that's another episode of Talkin Hawkins. Thanks for checking out Project Potter. Thanks for checking out the content, guys. If you did like the content, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing. These drop every Sunday, guys. And until next week, peace.